Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and remember, context. Context, well, it's everything. Today, here on Context is Everything Media Network, my name is John Michael, and I will be reading to you this textbook from the year published 2001. I'm doing this because context is everything, and so I'm developing, reshaping, resetting my foundational knowledge of world history, while also taking a quick dive into how culture has changed in the past 22 years since 2001, since this book's published. Because I feel like, having been a history teacher in schools for 4 years, middle school, that textbooks have changed a little bit in the past 20 years. So I'm reading this with also that in mind, but I'm also primarily trying to develop my historical context, because how many times do I have to say it? Context is everything. So here, yesterday we had a nice dive, a deep dive into the Indus Valley, and there was a good question there. There's a good question there at the end. Maybe I should write those questions on a sticky note and put them in the book so that I can see them when I open the book. Because it had something to do with typing and clicking around on the internet. I didn't do that. And I don't want to waste your time, you beautiful people's valuable time. So I'm going to move on. But this Indus Valley is bizarre. The thing that sticks out to me, really, is that they had plumbing in their cities. Apparently they had plumbing, like underground plumbing. You could have a toilet that would let out into the underground plumbing 4,500 years ago. And in England, 500 years ago, they were throwing their excrement out their window, causing the Black Plague. I might have messed up all of those historical facts, but again, I'm reading this book so that I have that sort of historical context. Do you see? Come along, join me, let's learn together. My name's John Michael here at Context is Everything. Why don't we get started? Section 2, Chapter 3, the Indus Valley and its civilizations. So we're headed east. The kingdoms of Ganges. The kingdoms of the Ganges. Again, the goal of this show, I think, is primarily for me to read this. So, minimal exposition. Gonna primarily be reading it and then a little bit of exposition. Kind of like a teacher getting through the topic. And I want to get through the entirety of the book, page 55 of 1007. Setting the scene for the kingdoms of the Ganges. And again, we're in the Indus Valley. This is in India, modern day. Setting the scene, the Aryans were warlike people. Their hymns praised their warriors as brave heroes and successful looters. In the Satarudrya, in the Satarudrya, a poet lauded these warriors with these words. Hail to the Lord of Thieves. Hail to the destructive ones, armed with spears. Hail to the Lord of plunderers. Hail to the archers, to those who stretch their bowstrings, and to those who take aim. That's from Yajur Veda. Over the centuries, the Aryans have destroyed and looted the cities of the Indus Valley and became builders of new Indian civilization. It rose in the northeast along the Ganges River. It rose in the northeast along the Ganges River, rather than the northwest along the Indus. Those are two important rivulets, or river structures. Aryan civilization. The Aryans were among many people of the Indo-European The Aryans were among many groups of Indo-European people who migrated across Europe and Asia, seeking water and pasture for their horses and cattle. The early Aryans built no cities and left no statues or stone seals. Most of what we know about them comes from the Vedas, a collection of prayers and hymns and other religious teachings. Aryan priests memorized and recited the Vedas, and thousands of years before they were written down. As a result, the period of 1500 BC to 500 BC is called the Vedic Age. In the Vedas, so I guess the Vedas are verbal tradition passed down for 1,000 years. No written. They didn't have cuneiform. They didn't have the benefit of learning from those Phoenicians, right? Alphabets. In the Vedas, the Aryans appear as warriors who fought on chariots with bows and arrows. They loved eating, drinking, music, chariot races, and dice games. These nomadic herders valued cattle, which provided them with food and clothing. Later, they became settled farmers. Families continued to measure their wealth with cows and bulls. Aryan society. From the Vedas, we learn that the Aryans divided people by occupation. The three basic groups were Brahmins, or priests. So Brahmins are priests, holy people. The Kshatriyus, or warriors, and the this is brutal, I'm sorry. Visyus, or herders. Okay, so you have priests, warriors, and herders. The Brahmins, the Kshatriyus, and the Visyus. The Visyus are herders, farmers, artisans, and merchants. This is brutal. I'm really sorry, folks. But hey, bear with me, because it's a long road, and not only am I learning how to remember history, I'm also learning how to read. At first, warriors enjoyed the highest prestige, but priests eventually gained the most respect. Their power grew because Brahmins claimed they alone could conduct ceremonies needed to win favor of the gods. The Vedas also show that the Aryans felt vastly superior to the Dravidians, the people who they conquered. Many scholars think that the Dravidians may have been descended from the original inhabitants of the Indus Valley. The Aryans separated Dravidians and non-Aryans into a fourth group, the Sudras. These groups included farm workers, servants, and other laborers who occupied the lowest level of society. During the Vedic Age, class divisions came to reflect social and economic roles more than ethnic differences between Aryans and non-Aryans. As these changes occurred, they gave rise to a more complex system of castes, or social groups, into which people were born and which they cannot change. Definitely a big knock on that part of the world. To this day, as I understand it. Is the mustache getting in the way of my mouth being visible for movement? Leave in the comments below if my mustache gets in the way of my mouth movement. Aryan religious beliefs. The Vedas show that the Aryans were polytheistic, They worshipped gods and goddesses that embodied natural forces such as the sky, sun, storm, and fire. Fierce Indra, the god of war, was the chief Aryan deity. Indra's weapon was the thunderbolt, which he used not only to destroy demons, but also to announce the arrival of rain, so vital to Indian life. Other major gods included Varuna, the god of order and creation, and Agni, the god of fire. Agni also served as the messenger who communicated human wishes to the gods. The Aryans also honored animals such as monkey gods and snake gods. Brahmins offered sacrifices of food and drink to the gods. Through the correct rituals and prayers, the Aryans believed they could call on the gods for health, wealth, and victory in war. As they lived, the Aryans changed. So too did their beliefs. Some religious thinkers were moving toward the notion of a single spiritual power beyond the many gods of the Vedas, called Brahman, not Brahman, Brahman, that resided in the things, in all things. Say that again. Some religious thinkers were moving towards a notion of a single spiritual power beyond the many gods of the Vedas, called Brahman, that resides in all things. There was also a move toward mysticism. Mystics are people who devote their lives to seeking spiritual truth through meditation and yoga or spiritual and bodily discipline. Aryan mystics sought direct communication with divine forces. The religions that emerged in India after the Vedic age reflect the impact of mysticism as well as the notion of Brahman. Expansion and change. So in this section we have nomads to farmers, and that's it. We have 9 minutes and a page and a half. That's doable. Expansion and change. Over many centuries, waves of Aryans went through the mountain passes into northwestern India. Aryan tribes were led by chiefs called Rajas. A Raja was often the most skilled war leader elected to this position by an assembly of warriors. He ruled with the advice of a council of elders made up of the heads of families. From nomads to farmers. Aryans mingled with people they conquered. Gradually, they gave up their nomadic ways and settled in villages to grow crops and breed cattle. From the local people, they learned farming and other skills and developed new crafts of their own. In time, Aryans spread eastward to colonize the heavily forested Ganges basin. By about 800 BC, they had learned to make tools out of iron. Equipped with iron axes and weapons, restless pioneers carved farms and villages out of the rainforest of the northeast. Tribal leaders fought to control trade and territory across the northern plain. Some Rajas became powerful hereditary rulers, extending their influence over many villages. Walled cities filled with multi-story houses rose above the jungle. That's interesting. Multi-story houses in 500 BC. By 500 BC, the new Indian civilization had emerged. It consisted of many rival kingdoms. However, due to acculturation, or the blending of two or more cultures, the people shared a common culture rooted in both Aryan and Dravidian traditions. By this time, too, the Indian people have developed a writing language, Sanskrit. Thank you. By this time, too, the Indian people had developed a writing language, Sanskrit. Priests now began writing down the sacred texts. Epic literature. Under the title Epic Literature, you have the Mahabharata and Ramayana. I'm sorry about the pronunciation. I really am not intending to be silly at all. Despite the new written language, the Aryans preserved a strong oral tradition. They continued to memorize and recite ancient hymns, as well as 2 long epic poems. The Muhabharata and the Ramayana, as well as 2 long epic poems. The Muhabharata and the Ramayana. Like Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh, the Mahabharata and Ramayana mix history, mythology, adventure, and religion. Mahabharata is the India's greatest epic. Though the tale's nearly 100,000 verses, we hear echoes of battles that rival Aryan tribes fought against to gain control of the Ganges region. 5 royal brothers, the Pandavas, lose their kingdom to their cousin. After a great battle that lasts for 18 days, the Pandavas regain their kingdom and restore peace to India. One episode, known as the Bhagavad Gita, reflects important Indian religious beliefs about the immortality of the soul and the importance of duty. Okay, so the Bhagavad Gita is in the Mahabharata. I didn't know that. Bhagavad Gita, I'm aware of. Ramayana. The Ramayana is much shorter but equally memorable. It recounts the fantastic deeds of the daring hero Rama and his beautiful bride Sita. Sita is kidnapped by the demon king Ravana. The rest of the story tells how Rama finally rescues Sita with the aid of a monkey general. Of the monkey general Hanuman. Say that again? The rest of the story tells of how Rama finally rescues Sita with the aid of the monkey general Hanuman. Like the Aryan religion, these epics evolved over thousands of years. Priest poets added new morals to the tales to teach different lessons. For example, they pointed to Rama as a model of virtue or as an ideal king. Likewise, Sita came to be honored as an ideal woman who remained loyal and obedient to her husband through many hardships. Looking ahead, the Aryans were the first of many people to filter into India through passes like the Hindu Kush. Even though scholars recognize that our knowledge of the Aryans' migration is very limited, most accept that Aryan tradition and beliefs formed the framework for later Indian civilizations. Aryan religion beliefs would evolve into major world religions. Just as the Middle East gave rise to 3 world religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, South Asia was the birthplace of 2 influential faiths, Hinduism and Buddhism. Okay, that's the end of that. Mahabharata. I am happy that you guys are along with me here on this reading. And if this is background noise for you, please let me know in the comments below how distracting the many reading errors are. I figure I'm probably going to work those reading errors out by the end of this book. But let's see. The Aryans. Who are the Aryans? I mean, honestly, I'm just going to say it straight up. When I think of Aryans, I think of the quote-unquote master race from the Nazi ideals. I don't think of the settlers who went to India and are now modern day, like the 2,000-year-old ancestors of modern day Indians. Indians. Aryans. So there's like this synthesizing information. I'm going to quickly, briefly go into that. Because just showing how the Aryans moved through the map. And it looks like they came from like the... I'm not really good with the maps, man. I'm really not good with maps, but pastures are few and far between out here. Is that Ukraine? Is this Ukraine? Modern day Ukraine? Is that? Because that seems like a nice fertile plain. Is that modern day Ukraine? I think it might be, because I see the little like pocket of water that I think is Crimea or something. The thing that was 2014. Either way, time's almost up. Context is everything. John Michael Monroy, what's under your hood? Reading this textbook from 2001. I'm learning not only about history, not only about the context of this world that we live in, but also how to read. No homework today. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you again. We'll see you again sooner than you would think. Because the weekends, oh, they fly by.